Hey everybody, Doa here, and guess what? Teamfight Tactics Neon Nights is on the way. Now, a lot is changing in this mid-set patch. Some things are going away, some things are being added in, so let's dive into it and see what you need to know to get ready to own the ladder. Now, I want to make sure before we get into this that you know that everything we're talking about here is on the PBE right now, the public beta environment. That means it's deep in testing still, and so some of the things I say might be changed by the time this launches on the live servers, but there's a lot to talk about, so it's cool to dive into anyway. Alright, so Academy is gone. Now, this was a trait that gave some stat buffs and it gave you a little bit more ability power when your fellow Academy champions use their abilities. And, you know, it was a little bit, in my opinion, kind of hard to see on the screen. It wasn't really an exciting trait, and some of the champions inside it were a bit problematic balance-wise, so that one's gone. The other one is going to be Imperial. That was a trait that everyone was trying to build comps around the whole time, and there were some that emerged, but the ones that emerged ended up being really kind of ridiculous reroll comps, like the Swain reroll, the Talon reroll, so I'm kind of happy that trait is going by the wayside as well. It was cool, but it's time for something new. So the Protector trait was another one of those traits that was a decent early game one, but when you got into some of those low cost reroll comps, started to kind of cause some issues. The Kog'Maw one being the biggest one, and also the Mutant Cho'Gath one as well. These are compositions where when you added that Protector crest to a champion, them getting the shield from using their ability in rapid succession got a little bit tricky to deal with on the team comp side. So another trait where, you know, a little bit problematic on balance, maybe not the most fun. Again, I'm happy it's gone. I really love all the changes they're making as far as what they took out, what they're putting in for Neon Nights. So the final trait leaving in Teamfight Tactics Neon Nights isn't really leaving as much as it's kind of changing. Sisters is becoming rivals. If you watched Arcane, you know the big question there is, are we still sisters, right? Well, the answer in Neon Nights apparently is no. Now Jinx and Vi are not really mortal enemies, but definitely on the rival side, so you don't want two of them on your board. Before, the sisters came together and buffed each other. Now, if you have both on the board, the trait is turned off completely, so you want to have either Vi or Jinx, but not the two together anymore. Alright, so now we know what's going out in Neon Nights. What is coming in as far as traits? Well, it's going to be three big ones. Hextech, Debonaire, and Rivals are the new big vertical traits. Let's talk about each one individually, though. You know that little Hextech core up in the upper left part of your screen, the one that shows you the augments that you chose already? Well, now that is going to burst with energy and give all of your Hextech champions a shield and extra magic damage whenever it goes off. That's going to be every few seconds or so. So Hextech champions, the more you have in, the bigger that shield is going to be, and the more magic damage they get. It's a great vertical trait to build into if you want something fairly easy with a lot of decent champions in it that's going to be durable and yet damage building. Debonaire. Oh, if you remember set 6, you remember the Chosen mechanic, Debonaire brings a little bit of that back in that a Debonaire champion in your shop can sometimes be the VIP. You'll be able to tell right away. It's got a little special symbol that shows you. Now, the VIP Debonaires have an extra ability that's added on to what they can do on the board as long as the Debonaire trait is active. Alright, now the Debonaire trait itself gives you a certain amount of hit points and ability power based on the amount of Debonaires you have in. So, you know, it's a nice little stat buff, but it really is all about the VIPs. And the cool thing is that each VIP has a very niche role to play. You can only have one at a time, but who you choose as your VIP is going to really have a big effect on how you build your compositions. Striker is our third new trait that we can talk about, and this one's pretty simple. You just get a certain amount of attack damage based on the amount of strikers on the board. That's really about it. Just more attack damage for the strikers, but again, these strikers, of course, are going to be champions that are going to be able to use that stat to the fullest. So one trait that's not new, but is getting a little bit of a change is Socialite. You might remember in the past that Socialite 1, 2, and 3 give you a different buff for whoever's standing in that spotlight hex on the board. Well, now, if you can make it to 5 Socialite, those buffs are doubled. So that means an insane amount of healing, lots of mana per second, and a lot of extra damage. So that Socialite champion, if you can hit that 5 trait, is going to absolutely wreck the other board. Let's talk about the champions themselves. We're going to go through this by cost. We're going to start at 1 cost and go all the way up to 5 cost. I'm going to talk about the new ones specifically, but before we get into that, we need to talk about Kassadin. Now, before Kassadin, if you remember, was a Protector mutant. Well, that Protector trait is gone, so what has he got in replacement? It's Scholar, the trait that gives you more mana every couple seconds for your whole team. What this means is that now it's really easy to get 2 Scholar online at the beginning of the game, which makes champions like Zyra that have existed before easier to come online as an early game carry. So not a new champion per se, but a cool change to an existing one that I think is going to have a big impact on the early game. Brand is back, that's right. Everybody's Fire Mage is now kind of a green Fire Mage because he's Debonaire Arcanist. His Debonaire VIP allows him to shoot not 1, but 2 fireballs at enemies on the other side. Those fireballs will burn your opponents over time, and if you hit someone who's already burning with another one, they get stunned for a little bit too. So you get that VIP Debonaire trait online, you get some mana items so he's casting fast. That's going to be a lot of damage ticking away and a lot of stuns happening across the board. Jarvan comes in as our next new champion at the 1-cost trait. He is going to be Hextech Striker, so able to get those early shields and magic damage online via Hextech, and then Striker just gives that extra attack damage as well. Now what Jarvan's ability does is he calls down a big flag to give everybody around him a decent amount of attack speed. Another good early game trait, but if you end up playing something that's more melee focused later in the game, that extra attack speed can make a big difference too. Nocturne returns once again. The ghostly assassin is back. He's also Hextech as well, which means he benefits from that early shield and magic damage, but it's really all about his ability. He's able to fear people, stun them for a little bit, and in the early game where rounds tend to last a lot longer, a stun is going to be very impactful just to keep the other side from attacking for that bit of seconds. So a strong assassin, late game probably not going to be the best champion in the world, but certainly something to consider putting on your board early on. Time to talk about the 2 costs. The first one we're going to talk about is going to be Ashe. Ashe comes in as a Syndicate Sniper, so no new traits associated with this champion, but 2 very good ones on board this time around. Syndicate and Sniper, both ways to sort of build around Ashe, and her ability fires kind of this big cone of arrows that hits a lot of people, so building a lot of attack damage on Ashe ensures a lot of area of effect damage going out. She's not, again, a hero I think that you can count on in the late game, but a good bridge hero, basically. The type of hero where you can put items on that you will then transfer to a stronger one that can use those items later. Something to keep in mind as you get into the early game. Next up is Rek'Sai. She's back as a 3-trait champion, Bruiser, Striker, and Mutant. All useful stuff. Her ability does a good mix of damage, healing, and stealing armor and magic resist, so she's able to make the other side frontline weaker and strengthen herself. That said, she's not the most durable champion in the world, so while she's going to be useful in the early and early mid game, probably going to want to transition out of her later on. Another 3-trait brawler joins Neon Nights in the form of Sejuani. She's going to be Hextech, Bruiser, and Enforcer this time around. And she's going to be one of those champions that's going to be one of the anchors of your early game frontline, right? She's very tanky. Her ability makes her charge and stun someone on the other side and gives her extra armor and magic resist for a while. So she's going to be very hard to take down in a lot of cases. And her traits make her one of those champions, honestly, that you can kind of ride into the late game sometimes. Hextech is a tree you're going to want to go deep in sometimes, up to 6 Hextech at times. And the fact that she has a stun, she has crowd control built into her kit, means that she's going to be useful a little bit longer than some of the other champions in the early game. A good choice to throw on your board. Swain returns in a slightly different form. Not a new champion, but this time around he's Hextech Arcanist, so is able to be worked in some of those early Hextech compositions. Other than that, he's the same old Swain. Syndra is back, this time as a 2-cost with a Debonaire Scholar trait lineup, and her ability is really similar to what we saw in the past, where she grabs the nearest unit to her and she throws it at the farthest unit away. Now that unit is going to land, be stunned for a little bit, and do damage to the area around it. If she's a VIP though, everyone around the unit when it lands gets knocked up for a short time as well. So if you make her the VIP, if you put some items on her, she can do a really good mix of crowd control and sometimes a lot of damage. Kind of scary at 3 stars, so keep an eye out for that. Talon has gotten a little bit of a tweak. He's a Debonaire assassin now, and his VIP ability makes his regular one even stronger. You got that ticking damage before from his attacks. Well, now it's going to last 100% longer, and it's going to do true damage if you make him the VIP. So I haven't really seen a lot of compositions that really focus on him yet, but I think the fact that it's got true damage in the mix and it's going to last that long, like maybe if you make him 3 stars, it could be good. Certainly a champion to keep an eye on. Time to talk about the 3-cost champions. The first one we're going to talk about is going to be one of my personal favorites, Gnar. I always love it when Gnar is in Teamfight Tactics. In the past, he had a tendency to go Mega Gnar, jump, and then like scoop everybody up in a big like AoE shove. This time it's a little bit different. He transforms and throws a rock. Now this big rock does attack damage along the path, and if you put some items on him, he can actually be like a pretty good mix of tanky and damage dealing. He's a champion that I really kind of want to try building around, although I haven't seen any boards really do that successfully yet. He's going to be Yordle, Socialite, Striker, so again, extra attack damage, Socialite, put him right in the Hex when you start, get that extra bonus damage for him as well. A really fun champion, and one that I'm definitely going to be working into as many comps as possible when things go live. Leona, another champion with a slight change. She is now Debonaire bodyguard, but still a great frontline tank. Her ability's still the same, but in Debonaire VIP form, she's able to regen her HP every second. I believe right now in the PBE, it's up to 0.8% each second, but again, that's probably going to change as things get tweaked. She's still a great frontline tank, and I'd say she's more useful now than ever. Corki is one of my favorite early game carries in Neon Nights. He's Yordle Twin Shot, his rocket does a big amount of AoE damage, and keep in mind that if you have the Twin Shot trait active, he actually has a chance to fire the rocket twice. That's a lot of explosions. Lucian, another Twin Shot, he's also Hextech added into the mix, probably one of the better mid-game AD carries if you're looking for an item holder. I'm not convinced yet that he can carry you all the way to the late game, but he's going to be someone that's going to use those attack damage items well and be a good center point for your team for a while. He's also another one of those champions that benefits from the double cast on his ability via Twin Shot, so make sure you have that trait online as well if you've got him on the board. Morgana comes in as a Syndicate Enchanter. Her ability is really neat, but it's a little bit complicated. She shoots up a couple chains and gives herself a shield. Now, while that shield is active, those chains are going to be doing magic damage to people. If the entire duration of her ability happens without her shield being broken, she'll stun everyone she's attached to as well. So I prefer to keep her in the second row, so she's got a little bit of protection, but she's still close enough to hit people because her range is kind of short, so keep that in mind. Senna comes in as Socialite Enchanter, but she is really interesting as a 3-cost. Her ability fires a straight line that does 150% of her attack damage and also heals people based on the number of enemies hit. Now what's really cool about her is that I think she can actually work as an AD carry, but with the Socialite Enchanter traits, you wouldn't expect that. But trust me, try it out, she does really, really well, and I think maybe even can be the centerpiece of some compositions. Tryndamere comes in, this time as a Chem Tech Challenger. He spins to win through the enemy team, doing magic damage as he goes along, and then gets empowered attacks for a couple seconds as well. Certainly a strong AD carry. Let's get into the 4-costs. Here's where it gets serious. Ahri is a Syndicate Arcanist that is probably one of the premier AP carries of the set. She fires out her Orb of Deception, doing magic damage as it leaves and comes back to her. Every time she casts the ability, though, she adds another orb, so that means a wider and wider area of the board hit on the other side. Definitely something that can crush the enemy if she lives long enough. Alistar joins Teamfight Tactics for the very first time ever as a Hextech Colossus. He charges through the enemy team, knocking people back and then knocking them up at the end of the cast. Great amount of crowd control, middling amount of damage. I don't think you really make him a carry, but he can be good as a disruptive force in the mid to late game. Draven returns in typical Draven fashion. This time he is a Debonaire Challenger, so getting that extra attack speed, but as always, coming back with those spinning axes. If you put him in a place where he doesn't move much, he can catch those and keep empowering his attacks to absolutely wreck the other team. One of the strongest carries I've seen yet on the PvE. Aurelia's back as one of the best melee carries in 6.5. She's Scrap Striker this time. She dashes through the enemies doing damage, and if she kills someone on the way, she gets to auto-cast the ability again. So when the enemy team gets low health, expect the resets, expect the cleanup. Very strong champion. Kha'Zix leaps in as a mutant assassin, and I do mean leap literally, because his ability sends him at the back line where he hits someone pretty hard, and then mana reaves him as well, which makes their spell take 50% longer to cast. Decent amount of damage, but I still feel like he hasn't really found his place as the late game assassin carry yet. Renata Glask, League of Legends' newest champion, joins Teamfight Tactics as a Chem Tech Scholar. Good traits, but her ability is incredible. She sends out a huge wave of poison gas that does damage over time, and the best part is that this ability can stack. Hit people multiple times with it, they're taking more damage per second. You gotta be careful though, because when she dies, all of that poison goes away if it's still on any enemies. So really high-powered champ, but one you need to make sure stays safe. Our final new 4-cost champion is going to be Sivir, Hextech Striker. Her ability on the hunt makes her attack faster and makes her attack start to bounce around the back line. If you get her in a position where she's got enough time to start those really rolling, you'll be able to burn through the enemy team pretty quick. Let's talk about Vi. Apparently she wasn't satisfied being a 2-cost, and that makes sense because Jinx ended up being 5-cost. That's a little bit unfair, right? Unfortunately for Vi, she only made it to 4-cost. The good news is that she's a great champion now. Still an Enforcer Bruiser, but the Sister's trait has been replaced by Rival. Now what this means is that her ability is going to cost 20 mana less as long as Jinx is nowhere to be found on your side of the board. Finally, it's time to talk about 5-costs. One of the newest champions in League of Legends joins TFT in Zeri as a Debonaire sniper. Her ability empowers her attacks, making them pierce all the way through the board and do a little bit of extra damage. As the VIP, she only needs to cast her ability once, and she gets that piercing effect for the entire fight. Silco comes in as Teamfight Tactics' first exclusive champion. That's right, the arcane supervillain joins the fray as a Mastermind Scholar. Scholar you know, but Mastermind is a trait that is unique to Silco. What it does is the 2 champions in front of him get to start combat with some extra mana. So if you want someone on your team to cast their ability a little bit quicker, just put Silco behind him. You know, he's there supporting, giving them encouragement, and they're going to be able to get their ability off a little bit quicker. Silco's ability, Unstable Concoction, is probably one of the most memorable ones we've ever had in Teamfight Tactics. He targets the lowest health ally, gives him 100% maximum health, bonus attack speed, and immunity to crowd control for 8 seconds. The drawback is, after those 8 seconds end, they explode, dealing magic damage to any enemies around them. So you gotta be careful that your carry isn't also the person on your team that's gonna have the lowest health quickly. You don't want your powered up, stacked Zeri to explode halfway through the fight. Neon Nights is still very much in the exploration phase. We don't really know what the top comps are going to be as of yet, but I think we've got some clues as far as what champions are going to be the standouts. Champions on the ability power side of things are going to include Ahri, Renata, and I gotta say probably Corki as well, since his ability does magic damage. If you build comps around them, especially if you 3-star the Corki, I think you're gonna do pretty well. On the attack damage side of things, number 1, no question about it, is going to be Draven. Right now in the PBE, he absolutely deletes teams. On the flip side, you can look at maybe building a team around the pair of Warwick and Tryndamere. They're very strong in terms of both being Chemtech and Challenger, so they get that extra attack speed, and you can build that Chemtech vertical trait around them as well. You'll be wanting to reroll them to 3-star if you've got the gold and the time. I think the other thing worth mentioning as well is that the Debonaire trait has the capacity to produce carries out of champions that you wouldn't normally think of. For instance, Brand, although he's at a 1-cost, if you have the Debonaire VIP trait active at 3-star with good items, he does a lot of damage all the way to the late game. So keep that in mind. Maybe that VIP could just be the VIP of the entire game. Now I realize that was a lot. Teamfight Tactics Neon Nights is one of the biggest mid-set patches ever, and although it seems intimidating, trust me, once you get into the game and play some, once you try out some things with the champions, you'll get it. It's not as hard and complex as you think it is. Another big part of Neon Nights is going to be the insane amount of new augments coming in as well to supplement the old stuff that we got to enjoy in regular old Set 6. We didn't have time to get into all of that in this video, but just get out there, play some games, try them out, experiment with them. You'll find some good ones to fit your team. Thanks for watching, everybody, and let me know what you think the strong comps are going to be. Remember, we're still figuring this out. It's still on the PBE. We've got a lot to look forward to with Teamfight Tactics Neon Nights. I'll see you on the ladder.